I'd just like to be clear from the get-go that this is not going to be a holistic review of the iPad experience in general, nor is this going to be a software walkthrough of iPadOS 16, but rather a look at the hardware offerings of the new base model 10th generation iPad and seeing if it's worth your money. Because here's the thing, over the past 4 or 5 years there's never really been an inherently bad iPad, and that hasn't changed with the new 10th generation iPad. But Apple's made a few choices here that kind of tip the scales negatively when it comes to this iPad in the grand scheme of things, especially compared to Apple's own refurbished offerings. Because be warned, I'm going to be referencing the iPad Air 4th generation from Apple's own refurbished store a lot throughout this video, because I think that that's the closest competition that this 10th generation iPad has. So without any further ado, let's get right into what this iPad 10th generation has to offer. Firstly, I'd just like to get it out of the way that this new 10th generation base model iPad isn't the simple, easy recommendation that the 9th generation budget iPad was, because that thing launched at $329 US and is still available on the Apple Store for that same starting price, because this 10th generation iPad now starts at $449 US, which is almost a 30% increase, which proportionally speaking in a budget sense is a lot of money, because the price point for this 10th generation iPad is staggeringly close to the iPad Air, which with this generation has the M1 chip, a more refined, streamlined design, and overall just better features. So Apple's really muddying the waters here with the iPad lineup and how confusing it's getting, especially over the past couple of years. And another very pertinent thing to note is that the whole world isn't just the US, because internationally, especially in Australia and in the EU, prices for iPads have gone up universally. So now the iPad 10th generation is no longer the easy budget recommendation, but rather something you really have to look into and see if it's really worth your money. But thankfully, Apple hasn't just increased the price without adding new features, because as you've probably seen throughout this video so far, there's a new 10.9-inch display on the iPad 10th generation with no home button anymore and a uniform bezel all the way around the display. It's a pretty nice improvement overall. In terms of the design in general, as Taylor Swift would like to say, everything has changed. Because this year we get 4 stunning colors: silver, yellow, pink, and my personal favorite, this really nice, gorgeous blue. And between you and me, if you decide to buy one of these iPads just because of the colors alone, I wouldn't blame you, because these are just drop dead gorgeous. The iPad 10 inherits the new flat industrial design that we've seen on the iPad Pro and the iPad Air, and personally I am all for it because I love the industrial form factor and design language for this iPad. The camera's been improved to a 4K sensor, and before I hear anything about iPad cameras don't matter, they don't from a cinematography standpoint or a photography standpoint, but when it comes to actually scanning documents or taking a picture of a faraway whiteboard, having a higher resolution, just higher pixel density camera is really helpful in those situations. So we have a new 4K camera, and we also have Touch ID that's been moved to the top of the iPad, which replaces the home button when it comes to biometric authentication, because Touch ID is now up here. We've also now got landscape stereo speakers, so if you hold the iPad in a landscape orientation, you'll actually hear sound coming from both the left and the right, so you'll have an actual proper stereo experience this time. But I think my favorite improvement with the iPad 10th generation is that the ultra-wide selfie camera has been moved from the portrait orientation to the landscape orientation. And this is such a good quality of life improvement, because when you're doing video calls or just doing work in general on the iPad, you're more likely to be holding it in a landscape orientation. And having the camera at the top where it's supposed to be for video calls is so good, because when it was on the portrait orientation before and you were holding it horizontally like this, the person you'd be calling would be looking at your ear instead of your face, and now they have a proper view of your face instead of looking at your ear during the entire video call. So thank you, Apple, for doing this. But now please bring it to the iPad Air and the iPad Pro, because for now this feature is exclusive to the 10th generation base model iPad, which kind of doesn't make sense because this should be on every single iPad. Now, even though this new 10th generation iPad largely looks and feels the same as the iPad Air 4 and the iPad Air 5, cases for those devices will not fit the iPad 10 and vice versa. Thankfully, in their infinite wisdom, Apple has thought of this, because there are 2 first-party case offerings for the iPad 10. The first one is the classic Smart Folio, which is, the classic folio. It covers the front and the back, leaves the sides exposed. And we've also got a new Magic Keyboard folio, which I made an entire separate video about. You can check the info card above if you want to learn more. But basically, it's a 2-piece design. You've got the back piece here, which connects to the back magnetically, just like so. And then you have the keyboard portion with the keyboard and the trackpad using the Magic Keyboard technology. But you've now also got a kickstand here, and it's like a mini Surface Pro. It's amazing. I love it. Check out the video, it'll be linked above. There are a few reasons why cases designed for the iPad 10 won't fit the iPad Air and the iPad Pro 11-inch and vice versa. Because first, the corner radii on both of these devices are a bit different, and the position of the smart connector is also different as well. Because on the iPad Pro and the iPad Air, they're right here, whereas on the iPad 10th generation, they're actually along the edge of the side here. And this is also a good time to mention that the iPad 10th Gen actually has USB-C. I forgot to mention that earlier, but better late than never. But the other reason is that the iPad 10th Gen is actually slightly thicker than the iPad Air and the 11-inch iPad Pro. And you might be wondering, why is that? Well, it's because of the display. But you also might be wondering, isn't this the same 10.9-inch 60Hz display as the iPad Air? Well, at first looks it might be the same, but it's actually not, because the display on the iPad Air is laminated, whereas this one is not. When a display is laminated, what that means is that the top glass, the thing you actually touch, is physically bonded to the display panel itself. So when you're touching the top glass, it feels like you're touching the pixels beneath, and it's a really seamless experience, especially when you're tapping, swiping, and writing, because it feels like you're actually maneuvering and manipulating the pixels beneath the display. This is in stark contrast to a non-laminated display, where the top glass and the display panel is not bounded together, and there's a very perceivable air gap between the two layers. The air gap is kind of difficult to show on camera, but it's something I would definitely recommend you go look at for yourself and compare an iPad Air and an iPad 10th generation next to each other with the laminated versus non-laminated display, because especially if you're an artist and you're thinking of using the Apple Pencil a lot, having that air gap might be a bit of a distracting experience for you. So it's definitely something I recommend that you should go and check out. Now, speaking of the Apple Pencil, let's just... what's going on here? Oh, that's right, the iPad 10th generation, despite the fact that it has flat edges, doesn't support the clearly superior Apple Pencil 2nd generation. Why? Like, literally why? The iPad 10, with its new squared off design that it shares with the iPad Air and the iPad Pro, doesn't actually support the 2nd generation Apple Pencil. Instead, you have to make do with the 1st generation Apple Pencil, which, by the way, isn't a bad stylus whatsoever, but it's just really inconvenient to use with this 10th generation iPad because you have to do a bit of a workaround to get it to work in the first place. So the 1st generation Apple Pencil uses Lightning. But wait, the iPad 10 doesn't have Lightning, it has USB-C. Well, that's where the genius comes in, because Apple is actually including a USB-C to Lightning adapter, female to female, with the iPad 10, so you can connect the Apple Pencil 1st generation with an adapter with the cable to the iPad 10 to sync it up and charge. Let me show you how it works. So first, let's take off the cap that we hope we don't lose and put on the adapter, the lightning end into the lightning connector right here. Okay, step 1 done. Now let's take the USB-C cable that you probably got, no, that you definitely got with the iPad 10, and you can put it into the adapter like so. Now this is already looking kind of comical, but you have to plug it into the iPad to charge, so let's do that. This is all happening in real time, by the way. There we go, it's plugged in. And now the pencil shows up. And I was kind of wondering if you could write with the pen while it was charging, but you can't. I wasn't expecting it to, but that's besides the point, because this whole situation, it's kind of stupid. From what I can tell, this is very clear product segmentation on Apple's part, because they don't want to cut into iPad Air sales, because the iPad Air does actually support the 2nd generation Apple Pencil. So Apple made the very similar looking 10th generation iPad support the 1st generation Apple Pencil to give people a reason to upgrade to the iPad Air. I get that from a company standpoint, but from a consumer standpoint, dealing with this is just not the best look. Suffice it to say, this should not be a continuing trend with Apple, because the Apple Pencil 1 has been out since 2015. So I think it's a fair time to retire it and go full force with the Apple Pencil 2. So next time, this should not be a thing. Please, Apple, come to your senses. If you're watching the video to this point, firstly, thank you very much. And secondly, you might be thinking that I hate this iPad. And frankly, I don't. Because overall, if you look at the entire package, this is still a very compelling iPad in a vacuum. But the thing is, we don't buy these things in a vacuum, because we buy these by comparing them against the competition, which Apple themselves provide. The 10th generation iPad with its new A14 chip, or from the A13 from the previous generation, starts with 64 gigs of storage for $450 US. Now 64 gigs of storage is really cutting it tight. It is usable if you use mainly like cloud-based services, but if you need more storage, 256 gigs, which is the next model up, is $150 more. But if you decide to get the keyboard case as well, along with the Apple Pencil, you'll be nearing $1,000 US for the base model iPad, which is a lot of money. And for that elevated price point, you're making a few sacrifices, namely in the display because it's not laminated, and also when it comes to the Apple Pencil, because you're getting the 1st generation and not the 2nd generation. But here's the thing, because if you head to Apple's official online refurbished store, which is for all intents and purposes basically the same as buying brand new, because you still get brand new warranty and the devices themselves are almost indistinguishable from brand new products, you'll find something very surprising. Because in the US, buying a refurbished iPad Air 4 directly from Apple, a 64GB version will cost you $769 US, which is only $20 more than the base model 10th generation iPad. And if you head to like the Australian refurbished store, for example, or even many other refurbished stores around the world, the iPad Air 4 is actually cheaper than the 10th generation iPad. Because in Australia, the 10th generation iPad is 750 Australian dollars, but on the refurbished store, it's only 710. So it's cheaper to buy refurbished, the iPad Air 4, than it is to buy a brand new 10th generation iPad. The reasons I keep comparing the iPad Air 4 to the iPad 10th generation is because they both have the same very powerful A14 chip, which is great for both of them, but the iPad Air 4, even though it's the older device and even though it's refurbished, has a better quality display with better color accuracy, and it's actually laminated, which is a huge deal if you're an artist or if you just don't like having that air gap in between the display panel and the glass panel. And it's also got support for the second generation Apple Pencil, which the iPad 10 does not. From a usability perspective, the second generation Apple Pencil is also just a lot more convenient, because you can also do the double tap on the side to change writing utensils in your software, and you can store it and charge it on the side of the iPad magnetically. You don't have to deal with cables, dongles, and adapters. It's just a lot better experience all around. To end off this video, the iPad 10th generation is not a complete write-off, because despite its annoyances and quirks, like I said before, it's still a very good iPad overall, and the iPadOS experience is still going to be largely the same between this and even a more expensive iPad Pro. So from that perspective, this is still a very good iPad. And if history repeats itself, which it usually does, the base model iPads tend to get some pretty significant discounts. And I wouldn't be surprised to see this base model 10th generation iPad go below $400 US when it comes to savings during like these massive sale seasons like Black Friday and Christmas, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. Plus, if you have no intention of using the Apple Pencil with the iPad and thereby forego the idiosyncrasies of using this particular pencil with this particular iPad, and if you combine the iPad 10 with this Magic Keyboard folio case with the kickstand and the whole dual portion design, which is actually only available for the iPad 10, you've actually got a very decent laptop alternative with like a very just decent overall setup for content consumption and especially video calls with the camera in the horizontal position. It's just a very solid device for content consumption and just general everyday productivity usage. Okay, so hopefully I didn't get too frantic and too mad at this iPad throughout this video, because like I've said a few times before, this iPad is not inherently bad. It's just that Apple made a few choices that kind of don't make sense for this particular iPad. But if you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comment section down below. And if you like this video or if I provided any value to you, make sure to give it a huge thumbs up, subscribe for more tech content, and in the meantime, my name's Ramal. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.